Laura Dekker's love for the ocean started at birth. Her parents were on a 7-year sailing trip when Laura was born, and Laura spent her first 5 years at sea. By age 10, she had sailed a small boat solo around the Netherlands. After sailing to England by herself at the age of 13, Laura decided to fulfill her dream of sailing around the world. On August 21st, 2010, Laura set off from Gibraltar at just 14 years old aboard a 40-foot bright red ketch called Guppy. 1 year and 5 months later, Laura arrived in St. Martin in the Caribbean, successfully completing her solo circumnavigation of the world and becoming the youngest person ever to do so. She sailed 27,000 nautical miles over 519 days. Today, Laura is still sailing, literally and figuratively. She is a motivational speaker, author, world traveler, and professional yacht skipper, and she's still chasing her dreams. Welcome, Laura, and thanks so much for joining us on Life Excellence.
Thank you.
Laura, you've lived an incredible life and a very different life than most people. You were born on a boat and have spent most of your life on a boat. Tell us what it was like growing up as a sailing family, and how did you start sailing alone at such an early age?
Yeah, like you said, I grew up while sailing. I was born during a circumnavigation of my parents. So I was born in New Zealand and then sailed the first years of my life. And I think I just loved it. So I started sailing opties when I was 6, and just the boats just kind of got bigger. And yeah, I was just sailing every day, and I was really fanatic at it. So I didn't have many friends that wanted to sail in the winter and every day. So I just ended up sailing alone a lot.
I think most girls your age, and probably boys too, were playing with dolls and toys like that. And you had boats. When did you have your first boat?
Yeah, so I was 6 when I got my first Optimist. That was really my own first boat, and before that, I experimented with anything that floated.
That's awesome. To say that you're adventurous would be a huge understatement. How old were you? You were 14 when you undertook this huge voyage that we'll talk about in a minute, but how old were you when you first thought about sailing around the world by yourself?
I think the first time the idea crossed my mind, I was about 8. That I thought, cool, yeah, one day I want to do that. But you know, at that stage, I didn't think I was going to do it when I was 13 or on my own. I just thought one day when I'm older, I want to sail around the world. And I did start preparing for it from that stage on, because I just thought, okay, if I want to do that, even when I'm much older, then I'm going to need a boat and I'm going to need lots of experience. So I figured it'd be best to just start the preparations.
And so that was around 8 years old. At 10, you sailed around Holland by yourself. Tell us about that. What was that trip like? How long did it take? And how did you come to do that? 10 years is pretty young age to even go out at sea alone, let alone sail around Holland.
Yeah, so when I was 10, I found on the shipyard, we were living on a shipyard because my dad was building a big boat. And on that shipyard, I saw a boat that I quite liked. And I found the owner and asked him if I would clean the boat and fix some things that were broken on it, because it clearly hadn't been used for a long time. If in return I could use it, and to my surprise, he actually said yes, and it was a little seaworthy 7-meter boat. So I scrubbed it all up and fixed a few things, and we put it in the water. And then I had always done these summer sailing holidays with my dad, sailing around the Netherlands, and then I thought it'd be really cool to do that on my own. And my dad was pretty busy that holiday as well. So I think, one with one, otherwise I wouldn't be able to sail, because there's so much going on. And then I thought, well, then I'll just go on my own. So I did. Well, I went together with my dog. I had a very protective dog, and he always sailed with me. So yeah, so that year we sailed over the channels and the IJsselmeer and to Friesland and the islands just north of the Netherlands for 6 weeks. I think we were going.
Oh my
Yeah,
goodness. So you're 10 years old, you're sailing for 6 weeks, basically by yourself, but with your protective dog. What was that like? That was your first experience being gone for so long. It seems like a
yeah.
super early age to do something like that.
I was super nervous, of course, and I had to call my dad like 5 times a day to let him know where I was and if everything was going fine. But yeah, I loved it. It was so nice to kind of have my own little home and yeah, choose where I wanted to go and have little adventures. Yeah, it was just, yeah, it was amazing. I really love that.
I think for a lot of people, young and old, being alone for that long would be a deterrent to a solo trip like that, even of that short 6 week duration, let alone 17 months. And again,
Yeah.
we'll talk about that shortly. But for you, it was actually the opposite. You seem to enjoy that time alone.
Well, then I only sailed during the day, and at night I was always somewhere, either in a harbor or a little island, or I was moored somewhere, and there were generally other people or people who had kids my age. So it was just during the sailing and the nights, of course, that I was alone. But during the day, I generally found friends or other people to be with, and um, yeah, I really kind of like that mix. Also, on my trip around the world, actually, it was the same. Whenever I was on land, there were other sailors and other families, and sometimes with teenagers. So I'd be really busy and have a lot of people while I was on land, and it was quite nice to have that peace and quiet when I was at sea to kind of process things and think about it all and really come back to myself. So I've always liked that kind of, yeah, being on my own on the boat and just lots of people on land.
So it was a nice balance. You looked forward to
Yeah,
seeing people, but you also enjoyed that time by yourself in the meantime.
yeah, very much.
Laura, there are lots of incredibly supportive parents who want their children to succeed in whatever they set their minds to. But I'm not sure how many of those parents would be super excited for their 14-year-old daughter to set off for 2 years circumnavigating the world, especially alone. Your father obviously knew that you had the skill to do that, the sailing skills, in spite of whatever concern that he might have had about you being gone for that long. He supported your dream. Share a bit about your relationship, especially with your dad, because I know he was the sailor of the family. Even though your mom was obviously quite a sailor too, if she was gone on a 7 year
Not really.
circumnavigation trip. Um, but tell us about your relationship with your dad and your mutual love of sailing.
Yeah, so my parents divorced when I was 6, and I chose to be with my dad, partly because of this love for sailing that I already had at that age. And my mom is not really a sailor. She loves living on the boat and she loves traveling, but she doesn't really like the sailing.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, it's really something that I shared with my dad, and I think we have that same love and same passion for the ocean. So we would just spend all our free time either sailing or learning about sailing or learning navigation or yeah, whenever I had a question, he would be there for me. And yeah, still today, like if I have a question about the boat or something technical or anything sailing related, I will talk to my dad, and the other way around as well, because he has got his boat now. And yeah, we really share this interest of fixing the boat but also sailing with it and routes, and so we talk about that a lot.
So you had done a couple solo trips and were obviously very well skilled in sailing, and yet you were 14 years old. What was his reaction when he probably wasn't totally surprised given his background and given your background that you wanted to embark on such an ambitious journey. But what was his reaction?
No, he wasn't really surprised because I had been talking about it for ages, of course, that one day I wanted to do that. He was slightly surprised when I said I wanted to do it when I was 13. But yeah, I think he didn't really believe that I would really do it. So he just kind of jokingly said, "Sure, if you can organize everything and get the money together and get the sponsors or whatever, however you want to do it. If you can get your boat ready on your own, then you can go." And it was kind of a joke because he didn't really think I could do that. But I took it really seriously, and I was looking for sponsors, and I got all the things I needed for that 7 meter boat because I wanted to do that originally on the smaller boat. And then he realized, okay, she's really serious, and we sat down to chat. Um, and yeah, my dad's standpoint really was that if he would not allow me to do it or be against it, that I would do it anyway, and that it wouldn't be with his guidance, and that I wouldn't be in touch, and that it would be much unsafer if I did it with my experience than when he could help me. In which he was probably right. I probably would have done it, and it would have been much more dangerous because I did lack experience in the preparation of boats, of course, and with his help to prepare my boat, it was so much safer.
How did your mom feel about you sailing around the world by yourself?
Mum was not very excited. Also because she doesn't like sailing and she gets quite seasick. So for her, it's something that she doesn't like, then her daughter is gonna do, and she can't imagine how I can really like it. Um, so yeah, it was. I think it was a lot harder for her, but she did have the same opinion. She did say, okay, I know you well enough that if we say no, you're going to do anyway. So it's better to just support you and be there for you, and make sure that you can do it in the best and safest way possible. So both my parents supported it. But yeah, for my mom, it was harder, I think, in that aspect. For my dad, it was harder because he got all the criticism over him, um, or most of it anyway. But yeah,
Was there
that's
discussion
another
at all about
part
the
of it.
risk of the trip? I mean, I understand, again, supporting your kids and wanting them to achieve their dreams and them knowing that you would at some point do it anyway. Even if they said no, at some point you would be able to make that decision completely on your own. But was there discussion around the risk of that trip? Because there had to be huge risk, I'm imagining, sailing around the world in a 40
Um,
foot, a 12-meter
yes,
boat.
my dad was. Yeah, my dad was mostly worried about me being ashore, and not the sailing because he knew I could sail. He knew I would how I handled in tricky situations, and he knew I wouldn't panic, and he knew I could fix things when they broke. So that the sailing he wasn't so worried about, but he wasn't particularly happy about a young girl then wandering around everywhere. So we talked about that mostly, that I just wasn't allowed to go ashore on my own, and that I had to go to make friends on other yachts, that I shouldn't anchor in like bays where no one else was, that I should always be under the people. So he was much more worried about the being ashore aspect than the sailing.
Okay. Laura, I know you're a mom now, so you have a better appreciation for what it must have been like for your parents when you told them what you wanted to do. What advice do you have for parents when it comes to supporting their children's dreams and aspirations?
Well, Yeah, I definitely, I already had a lot of respect for my parents for letting me go, but I definitely have much more now. Because it's very difficult to let your children go. You just want them safe on the couch next to you. But in the end, you're putting a child on the world not to have them sit on the couch next to you their entire life. You want them to live their dreams and do their thing, and be happy, and ideally do something good in the world. So yeah, I think that needs to start very young. If you, for example, if you have a child who says, I want to be an astronaut, and you go, well, I don't think that's gonna happen, because there's only that many people who become an astronaut, and maybe you should just focus on something a bit more normal, then you've already killed that dream. And that's kind of sad, because maybe they will never become an astronaut, but what bad is it if they try? And if you're going to support them through that trip, like if they do everything they can, because even if they don't manage, they will learn a lot from that journey. And I think that's something my dad did for me. He always, whenever I came up with something crazy, he would say, okay, well, let's talk about the risks, let's talk about the consequences. But he never said you can't do that or you shouldn't do that. um, he just talked through it with me, and then if I really wanted to do it, he supported me in it. And I think that is really important, to learn and to become also a stronger adult. Because if you're just protecting your children all the time, then by the time they're 18, they're suddenly going to be out in this world, and they're still going to have to learn everything. So it's better if they fail and fall on their nose, well, you can still look after them and you can still help them, than when that's going to happen when they're already much older, because then they have to really do it on their own. But
I
that
love
is
that
very difficult.
perspective, and that's really great insight. Laura, why was it so important for you to sail around the world yourself?
It wasn't really that important to me in the beginning, actually, because it just happened like that. I sailed to England when I was 13. And it was really on the way back from England that I just thought, okay, why can't I just start my trip now? I can sail up and down to England heaps of times, or I can go sail to France. But yeah, why not put all those miles behind each other, and then I'd be somewhere in the Canary Islands already. So to me, it seemed very logical to do it then. And obviously, none of my friends wanted to come or were allowed to come. My parents were busy with work, and being a teenager, I didn't really want my parents to come anyway. So yeah, it just seemed like a really logical thing to just go on my own. But I think most of all, it was the challenge to myself. It was the challenge, like, let's see if you can do this. More than anything else, just a feeling that I had to do this on my own, that I had to challenge myself. And um yeah, I can't really, like, there's not a really one clear reason why I needed to do it. It was this really strong feeling that I had, that I just needed to do it now.
That's awesome. And obviously you did. So you took off from Gibraltar, and the plan was to be gone for 2 years. You had no follow boat and no support team. You had to do everything by yourself: sailing, cooking, whatever else one does when one goes on a trip around the world by yourself. What was it like, Laura, to be alone for such an extended period of time?
Yeah, I really enjoyed actually being alone, especially at that time. I don't think I would enjoy being alone as much anymore now. I would just miss my family, and yeah, I don't feel like I need it now. But especially with everything that happened beforehand, before my trip, I had so much criticism and so much media fall over me, and the court cases and the childcare. It was so crazy. I felt very safe and very comfortable on the boat, because I knew how to deal with waves and with wind, with storms. If something broke, so I felt much safer and much more comfortable out at sea than I did being intimidated pretty much by adults while I was on land. So yeah, to me it was my safe place, and I was very happy to be on my own there and have the time to find myself back a bit, I think, and to process everything that had happened. But also later on, when I had kind of processed all that, to process the things that, I all the adventures I had, all the people I met, all the conversations I had. It was super nice to have that time on my own to, yeah, to just think about that. I also think that the world is just going at such a fast pace, and every day we do so much, and so many things we see and we talk about, and people we meet, and especially with all these online things, there's so much information coming into our brains. It's good sometimes to have some alone time to process all that, and I think that's exactly what the trip was for me. Just, yeah, being there, processing, finding myself.
And it seems like sailing, being out in the open sea by yourself, is really the antithesis of the way the world works. You mentioned or alluded to the hustle and bustle of the world, and media and social media, and expectations of people, and cynicism, and all the dynamics that exist in the world. Does that just make you want to get on a boat and leave again and just be gone forever?
Pretty much. Yeah, there's some days, definitely. Um, it is why after my trip, I continued sailing to New Zealand, and I really liked it because the life is a little bit slower than I was used to in Europe. So that was quite nice to me. But yes, to me, sailing also, when I think about, okay, like Elon Musk, and he's gonna have all these, that we have internet out at sea and globally and everywhere, and then I think, no, I don't want that, because that's my safe place. That's where I don't have to deal with the world. Yeah, yeah. So definitely.
You mentioned the court case, and so your father was incredibly supportive of you and your decision to embark on this journey, and your mother maybe a little less so, but she certainly understands you and supported you from that standpoint. But not everybody was as supportive, and the I guess the Netherlands government got involved. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so basically I needed some sponsors to get my trip underway. And for that, I think I wrote an article at some stage, or someone did an interview at some stage. What are you doing? Sorry. Yeah, there. For this, iPads are amazing. Keeping the kids quiet for a little. No, it's yeah. So I did an interview at some stage, and then the media just exploded, and the childcare basically jumped on top of it and said, "This is crazy. These parents must be crazy. This can't be happening." And they started a court case. They basically took the rights from my parents to take care of me. So at some stage, I wasn't even allowed to live with them anymore. And they just, yeah, it was one court case after the other, and all they wanted was just get me out of home. Like, I wasn't allowed to live with my parents.
Mm.
And that, it's, to me, that seemed rather radical, because I hadn't even really done anything, just said I wanted to sail around the world. But because of that, of course, the media jumped on top of it, and they just wrote whatever. And at some stage, I just felt like a discussion object rather than a person. I was just, people would just talk about me and not have any idea of me, or what I could do, or what I had done to prepare for that trip, or my parents, or background. But they have opinions, and they would just say that. They would just say, oh no, I hope she's gonna sink, and I think, her parents are crazy. And to hear all that, especially I think at that age, it's pretty hard. But for my parents, actually, it was really hard as well. It's probably, yeah, to have that happen to you out of the blue is always going to be a massive shock.
Yeah, I'm sure nobody expected that, and that had to have been expensive for your parents too to defend that. How did that obviously it was ultimately resolved in your favor because you got to do the trip, but how did that play out? What was the decision by the how far did it go in the court system and what did they finally say?
Yeah, so we were quite lucky that at some stage, quite in the beginning, we had a lawyer that came to us and said, "This is crazy, and I'm gonna help you guys." So he just helped us for free, and he did really an amazing job. But no, we ended up going through 8 court
Oh
cases.
my
I
goodness.
think it was in the end. Yeah, yeah, and they were all yeah, it just kept going and going, and then I was allowed to live with my parents, and then not, and then yes, and then no, and then there was something else, and then I needed a bigger boat, and yeah, so that's why eventually I sailed on the gin fizz on a 12-meter boat and not the 7-meter boat. But yeah, it went pretty far.
And so at some point, the courts ruled in your favor, and you got on a boat and you left, and you were able to leave all of that behind, and as you said, work through that in the first part of your journey. What were some of the highlights of the trip for you? What did you enjoy most?
um I think, well, I really enjoyed the time out at sea, obviously. Just to be there with my own thoughts and challenge myself. But yeah, mostly I just loved seeing all the different countries and meeting all the different people and see how different each country is, and that every country has good and bad things, and kind of try to take all the good things from everywhere. Um, but yeah, I love that. It's, for example, in some of the, yeah, poorer places where people live in little huts, that from this kind of Western mindset that I had gotten in school is like, oh, they're so poor and they don't have anything. We need to help them, and they're all miserable. And then, yeah, I met these people living in these tiny little huts with an entire family, but they were just the most happy, kindest, caring people, and they would invite me for dinner and show me around, and they were yeah, I love the how real they were, and how close they were to the family as well. And something that I will never forget is at some stage I asked them, well, don't you want to have a bigger house, or live somewhere else, and or have more stuff, or maybe some money? And they just looked at me and were like, well, but why? We have everything we need. We have a roof above our heads, and we have food from the land, and we have water from the waterfall, and we have all our kids, and we're healthy, and yeah, we don't need anything else. And to me, that was really a wake up call, that I thought, yeah, they're so happy and appreciative of what they actually have. And I think that's something that we've kind of lost. We always want more and more and more, and think that we're going to be happy if we have more stuff, whereas that's not what makes you happy.
Yeah.
I think it makes, yeah. And then and on the boat, I had the same, because the boat was really simple. I didn't have a fridge or a freezer. I didn't have a shower. I didn't have warm water. I only had 150 liters of water altogether anyway. um, and then you really learn to love it when you can have a warm shower, or when you're somewhere like on this boat that we have now. We do have a fridge and a freezer and a shower, and every day I'm still like, wow, this is amazing. um, so that's, yeah, I think that's one of the biggest gifts that the trip has gotten me, to appreciate everything I have so much.
I love that you use the word gift, and I was going to say what an incredible blessing, especially at
Hmm.
such an early age. And so you
Yeah.
had a negative experience with people, right, and in the media and the court system and all of that, and then you had the polar opposite
Yeah.
experience that you were just describing, and to be able to have both perspectives, really have all of that experience at 13 and 14, 15, 16 years old is really quite remarkable, and I'm
Yeah.
sure has really shaped you into the person that you are today.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm guessing that so there were lots of great experiences. I'm guessing that it wasn't all smooth sailing that entire 17 months. What were the biggest challenges along the way?
Um, the I think the biggest challenge was definitely before the trip and getting out of Europe. But sailing wise, the first trips I found really hard because I had to find my way. I had to trust the boat and learn and get this sleeping rhythm as well, because you can only sleep for an hour at a time, and then while you sleep you need to let the boat do its thing. And in the beginning I was just super nervous and super excited as well, and everything was new. So yeah, the first two trips were in that way really hard, that I had to find my way. Sailing wise, the Indian Ocean for sure, because I had lots of storms and things that broke and got knocked down. Um, so yeah, from a sailing aspect, that was very tiring and very tough. But mentally, I was in a really good place then. So I still find it one of the best trips because I was 48 days at sea, and somehow I completely got into the rhythm where I didn't care anymore about the days and the months, and I was just there with the boat and the wind. And um, yeah, I really was in that flow, I think. So even though it was really hard and we were going completely the wrong way for days and had no wind for 2 weeks, and yeah, somehow mentally it was quite a nice trip. Then South Africa was quite hard as well because I had a big storm there, and really big waves, and I had to hand steer the boat for 2 days. So I just literally couldn't do anything but hand steer the boat, and I was really, really, very, very exhausted after that. But yeah, so yeah, sailing wise, I definitely had some challenges, but I feel like because I was so in my element and so much doing what I wanted to do, that yeah, I didn't even really think about that. It was just, you just have to do that. You just have to go through it.
Yeah. Were you ever afraid? So you had some pretty big storms, and I can't even imagine what that's like. You weren't in a huge boat, and I'm sure that was incredibly challenging. Did you ever fear for your life or think, geez, I don't know that I'm going to get through this?
Um, Not really, but it is definitely part of the training I did with my dad to not panic. Because especially if you're on your own and you get scared or you panic or you think this is going to be the end, then most likely is, because that's when you're going to make mistakes. That's when you're going to freak out and not be able to think clearly anymore. So it's really important, especially while sailing alone, that you just don't get scared. It's just not an option. Yeah, you just can't. So I know the feeling. I know the feeling where I'm like, oh no, I don't know if I'm going to manage, but I've learned how to, I think, distract my brain in a way that I can cope with that and just keep going. So it's only afterwards, when it's all over, that I think, yeah, that was pretty close, or that was really tough. But in the moment itself, I just don't think about it.
You're still
It's just,
smiling
yeah.
though, even as you think about those the treacherous times and the big storms. So it seems almost it's amazing to me the level of maturity that you had at, again, 14, 15, 16 years old, to be able to navigate through adversity in the way that you did. Hey, how important was it that your belief in yourself and your ability to succeed never wavered? So that confidence.
Um, yeah, I mean, I think overconfidence is definitely not good. And I didn't know if I could do it. I wasn't sure. I wasn't like, oh yeah, no, I can totally do this. For me, everything was new, and I was basically just pushing my boundaries. Um, so I think there needs to be a balance. Of course, if you're totally scared and you don't believe in yourself, then you're never going to do it. But if you're overconfident, then the chance of doing things wrong is much bigger. So it's important to always prepare the best you can, and think, yes, I'm going to be able to do this. I think, and that's pretty much what I did. I just prepared and looked everything up and checked my boat. But I sometimes doubted myself. Yes, of course, that happens. Mm. I think it just helped in over preparing everything even more.
Yeah, the challenges that you faced had to have been, I would think, would be difficult for people of any age, even experienced adult sailors in their 30s, 40s, 50s. And although you're experienced, you were only 14 years old at the time that you started. What's the life lesson about overcoming adversity from your solo circumnavigation of the globe and from other experiences you've had since then?
Um, yeah, I think that's definitely something I learned, to just keep going and to not give up. Of course, while sailing, I think that's somewhat easier because if you're in a storm and everything is just really crappy and really tough, you simply can't give up. You just have to keep going. There's no choice. But obviously, with other things, I had a choice whether I was stepping on that boat or not, whether I was actually going to do that, and whether I was really going to keep going. And with these choices, yeah, I think I always just thought, yeah, let's prepare the best I can, and just go for it. And I think some people, they keep preparing and they keep finding excuses to make everything better, or that this still needs to happen and that still needs to happen, and then they don't do anything. So at some stage you just need to go and need to learn from mistakes. And um, I think an important thing for me is that I don't see things that don't work out or that didn't really go the way I wanted as failures, but as lessons learned. That I think, okay, that didn't really go that well, but what can I learn from it, and how can I do it better next time? So having that positive attitude to always just keep going and see the good in things, yeah, I do think that's pretty important.
Those are all great lessons. Thanks for sharing those. So you arrived in St. Martin and you're greeted by hundreds of well wishers, as well as I think your mom and dad and your sister were there. What did that feel like to know that you completed that amazing journey?
Strangely, not that special. Because, yeah, first of all, there were all these people, and I'm not, yeah, at that stage, that was very intimidating to me again. So I was not super happy about that, even though I know, and I knew at the time as well, I knew they were all there to wish me well because they were happy that I made it. But it was very intimidating for me, and I basically just wanted to go away again. So I was happy to see my parents, but I also just absolutely didn't realize what I had done. To me, it had become my life living on that boat. I'd sailed for almost 2 years, and I was just, yeah, it was my home, and I was just sailing from place to place. And I think I didn't really understand the fuss. I also didn't understand. Now I understand it much better because we sail with teenagers ourselves now. And yeah, if I see the most 13, 14-year olds, I think, yeah, no, you really can't do that. um, and I understand now why people said that it was crazy or that I shouldn't do that. But at that stage, being 14-year olds yourself, that's not something you understand. So to me, it was just like, yeah, I did this. What about it? I didn't really, I didn't really understand what the fuss was all about. Um, so that came much later. That appreciation, I think it was just at the time I was like, yep, I'm here.
You're so humble. That was an amazing accomplishment. Oh my goodness. And you um, sort of act like I don't know, you did well on a test in school or something. No big deal.
That's kind of what it felt like. It's really weird, but yeah, yeah. So it's yeah, funny.
So you said almost 2 years, 17 months during your teenage years between 14 and 16 is a considerable length of time, right? You started when you were
Yeah.
14 and when you finished, you were 16. How did you change as a person during that time, especially given how you spent those 2 years of your life? I would think that would have been a time of incredible growth for you as a person.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, normally you already change a lot between 14 and 16, and then adding that trip on top of it, I think, yeah, of course, I became much more mature. When I came back, I was at a stage that I thought I can never live with my parents again. I was living on my own. I had been doing everything on my own. It was not even an option to go back. I had my own life by the time I came back from that world trip. So yes, I was definitely had grown a lot.
Your accomplishments are truly amazing, and I have such admiration for the way that you've made your dreams come true, from your perspective and your insight, and even, I mean, you're not old even. 12 10 12 years later, you're still a young person, and yet you have such an incredible perspective about life, and I really appreciate that about you. I want to make sure, of course, that we talk about the Laura Dekker World Sailing Foundation, because I have equal admiration for that, because you not only made your own dreams come true, but you're now making dreams come true for other young people, which I think is just incredible. I have a passion for making a difference in the world, for adding value to people, and the young people are the future of our world. So we share the desire to pour into young people, to help them, to teach them lessons that will help them as they grow up, and as they make a difference for other people too. Tell us about the foundation and the incredible adventures that you've been able to provide for so many young people.
Yeah, so after the trip, of course, I did quite a few presentations, and I thought about everything that had happened and I had seen. Um, and the the more I realized how special that really had been and how much I really had learned from that trip, I think that true realization came in the years after, when I started building a life, and I thought, wow, this has been so useful. All these experiences, I'm still using all these lessons that I've learned on my trip today. um, and then at some stage I started working for a high school in the outdoor section, and I thought, man, it'd be so cool if I could take these kids on a boat and just send them through a storm, because that they'd really learn a lot from that. So that's how the idea for the foundation kind of grew. And then at some stage, yeah, I just started putting down ideas and working it out and seeing what the programs would look like. And then I met my partner, and I just, I ramble. I like talking, so I just talked to him about that, and he said, "Wow, yeah, that'd be really cool." Um, so we basically started setting that up together, and we now have this boat that I'm sitting on. It's 24-meter boat, and we can take 10 students. So we sail with kids between 8 and 16 years old in two different programs. So we kind of have a summer sailing program for the younger kids, and it's more like a summer camp. And then for the teenagers, 12 to 16, we really do 6 months of sailing. So we sail from Europe to the Caribbean and back. So it's 10,000 miles. It's a pretty long trip, and they can either join for 6 months or for a period along that trip. They don't have to join for the full 6 months, but some of them do. And on that trip, they need to do everything themselves. So I'm kind of replicating my trip, but with the if something goes wrong, we can jump in and make sure everything is safe. But they do have to cook, and they have to do the watches, with one of us as well on deck, of course. But they have to clean, they have to sail the boats. They're basically involved in all the aspects. And we visit a lot of countries along the way. And I think, it's on the one hand an amazing adventure for them, but what I see that it really does is we sail with international kids. So they're from all over the world. And they don't always get along. And you're in a small space, so they have to learn to communicate, they have to learn to work together, they have to become a team, they have to go through storms sometimes, they have to go through hard times, and all these things really, yeah, it really forms them, and they become much more self-aware, and self-confident, and they start to realize that they can actually do much more than they thought they could do. So we see really shy kids who kind of pop open and suddenly become really happy, bubbly people, or people who were just very unsure about themselves in the beginning, who in the end say, okay, this is just who I am, and people either deal with it or not. And I think, that is really important, especially while you're a teenager, especially in this age, because that's the age where everyone is telling you what to do, where teachers have an opinion, where parents have an opinion, where your friends have an opinion. And I think the opinion, and then nowadays also social media has an opinion. Um, and I feel like a lot of teenagers just become kind of lost and lose themselves because they just don't know who they should be for who. And yeah, that's something that we try to open up on the trip, that they can be themselves, and that they should be themselves, and that they should follow their heart and follow their dreams. Yeah, so that's basically what I'm working on full time nowadays.
Well, and they really get to figure out who they are, right? Unencumbered by all of those external forces that you talked about,
Yeah,
their
yeah,
parents or their friends or teachers' expectations of them, or the noise from the world, from social media, and they get to
yeah,
discover who they are as people. What a wonderful gift that you're able to give them.
yeah, yeah. That's well, we try.
What's some of the feedback that you've received from parents after the trip?
Really, yeah, really positive. They've just been. Oh, hang on, just 1 second. Uh, Yeah, no, they've been really, really positive, because there's been, especially the kids who are with us for 6 months, they change. That it's something that they take with them for life, and they do change, and they do suddenly start to pop open and do completely other things. So yeah, from the parents and from the kids, they all stay in contact, which by now is a lot, but it's really nice. They sometimes say, if they're close by, they will come and visit, or yeah, we have these like WhatsApp groups, and they all stay in contact. And it's really nice. You become kind of a big family.
I,
Yeah.
I was going to ask you how it feels. Do you feel like a mom to the kids, or like a big sister, or what is that? Because you have a mentor relationship and a friend relationship, and maybe all of those things, depending on the day and the circumstances.
Exactly. I think it can be friend, but mostly I think more of a mom role. since I'm mom anyway. Our boys are on the trips as well. So yeah, we're just there for them, and then especially the kids that stay long, you get to know them so well, and you really love them as well. Yeah, they're just you care for them.
Laura, how can our listeners and viewers learn more about you and more about the
Um,
foundation?
yeah, the best way is probably just looking on the website because all that information is on there. But they can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram if they like that. We try to do regular updates on there with what we're doing and where we are and what's happening. So you can find us on either of these platforms under Laura Dekker World Sailing or Laura Dekker World Sailing Foundation.
And we'll make sure that we put that information in the show notes too for our listeners and viewers. Laura, thanks
Thank
so
you.
much for being on the show today. I have such tremendous admiration and respect for you and what you've done, not only yourself, but I love the way you're pouring into young people and helping them to learn and grow in the way that you did through your solo circumnavigation of the globe. It's been great getting to know you today, and best wishes for your continued success.
Thank you very much.
Thanks again. Thanks for tuning into Life Excellence. Please support the show by subscribing, sharing it with others, posting about today's show with Laura Dekker on social media, and leaving a rating and review. You can also learn more about me at brianbartes.com. Until next time, dream big dreams and make each day your masterpiece.